teachers. What's the most disturbing thing you've confiscated off a student? There was a horrid smell coming from an area known as the dungeon. Just rows of lockers, so the principal and 2 teachers, lucky me, had to do a locker inspection. All the students had to open their lockers, so we could check them. We get to one locker and the kid is sweating bullets. He asks us not to inspect his, but of course we do. He opens his locker, looks normal, and after the other teacher rummaged through it a bit, he pulls out a bag, looks inside and starts gagging. The student, 16 years old, had a shopping bag full of used condoms. He told us that he kept them as proof to show people that he had an active sex life. One of my favorite stories. So a girl was getting searched for drugs. I was the witness. My male VP was going through her purse taking things out. She had a toy, except at first he didn't realize. He's holding it, opening the back of it, and looking into the battery compartment. When suddenly he realizes what he is holding. Wish I had a camera. A student came running to me during a break once, and wanted to drag me to a class to show me something. I went along and once there, he directed me to a student's desk. There was an open notebook lying on the desk, detailing my full name, birth date, address, license plate, and other insane stuff. We immediately took her to the office after she returned. Police was called. They confiscated her phone. She had her entire album titled Teachers or Professors Don't Remember, and quite literally every single teacher she had was in there. I was in 4 pictures, some of which she took secretly in class. The others were old ass pics from my old FASA book. Was a bit creeped out, to be honest. We found $15k in cash in the book bag of a 2nd grader when I was a teacher. Turns out he was a runner for the neighborhood gangs. He was 7. When I was in high school, one of the percussionists in the lowest level band class was suspended for a couple days after a dead squirrel was confiscated from his book bag. He evidently was planning on putting it in the band teacher's desk. My band teacher thought it was funny, but was otherwise generally unfazed by the news. One of my students turned in an assignment on a flash drive with a bunch of BDSM-30 on it. No, it wasn't intentional. A cannonball. It was in their locker. I guess it's not really disturbing, but it is odd. My mom was a teacher, and she had to take a lighter away from a student after he lit his test on fire. I remember there was a report of a student having a gun in his backpack, and he reached for it, but the teacher broke the kid's hand with one of the textbooks before he could get to it. Human finger. She insisted she'd found it by the ravine and just thought it was cool, so kept it until she'd decided what to do with it. But that means she'd either found a lone finger, or she was leaving out a part of this story. My 2 female classmates had a nice idea to bring matches and rubbing alcohol to school in 8th grade. They had a plan to lure a bully girl to a secluded area outside the school, pour bottles of rubbing alcohol on her from a tree and light her on fire. The only reason they got caught is because instead of leaving their backpacks in their classroom for an assembly, they brought them to the assembly room and some kid tried going through them to steal from them. They didn't admit when caught, but like 2-3 years later. I'm not a teacher, but I was in a class once, and a teacher went to take a phone away from a student when he heard it vibrating. When he walked over to her, he said, "Hand it over." She was so embarrassed because she wasn't using her phone. Her vibrator just started going off. A few kids laughed, but the teacher was the most embarrassed alongside the girl. 2 huge hunting knives from a 1st grader. Blades were 6 inches long and one was locked open. He had taken them from his dad's hunting gear and was showing them off in the boys' bathroom. His mom had passed when he was 4 and his dad was doing the best he could to raise and provide for 3 kids. Adjudicated youth. First day, dropped a bag of pot out of his pants. This was 20 years ago. It was his last chance after a string of several incidents, none of which included drugs. I never turned him in. He graduated the program. He's married with children and has a great job. I was with a VP as we searched a girl's bag and we found a burner phone, $3,000 cash, and her black book of clients. She was 18, so not much we could do, but man, it made crap real when you consider she had a book with about 20 men's names in it and what they liked. Second weirdest was the kid who brought 3 fish he had caught that morning. He just wanted to kill them. Like didn't catch them for food, but just to kill them. Student had brought a puzzle to school, but the pieces didn't match. Turned out it was a single piece from all the puzzles we kept at school, making every single one of them unsolvable. Obligatory, not a teacher, but I was in art class when my teacher told a student to throw a note she was passing around away. The note was a super graphic love letter sent by this girl's boyfriend, detailing how he'd frick her asshole and a bunch of bondage type crap. The weirdest part was this girl didn't have any friends in that class. She just stood up and passed it around to the popular kids, like she was proud of it. This girl was pretty out there, so our teacher didn't even have a reaction to it at that point. A cat. One of my students brought his cat to school zipped up in his sports bag. Poor little thing. Not my story, but my psychology teacher used to work with underprivileged kids. One student, maybe 8 years old, really enjoyed his class and gave him a jar as a gift. What's in the jar? Jelly? Jam? No. The teacher noticed cuts all over the boy's arms and slowly puts the jar down. It was full of old/new blood, completely filled. He figures that the kid saw it as a part of him and probably saw it as something very symbolic and meaningful. He says he was told when he started to never look up the kids he worked with because very few times is it a happy ending. The teacher's a great person. I imagine he just got a counselor and had an ambulance check the kid out and dispose of the jar. The kid's mother was also a drug addict. A hand-drawn tentacle 30 hentai comic. Kindergarten teacher found a needle in a boy's lunchbox. Turns out it was a used heroin needle that parents packed by accident. The boy now lives with his grandparents. The mother came in after losing custody and screamed at me for ruining her life and stealing her child. I calmly called school security and she was escorted off campus. Very bright boy is now in 2nd grade and his grandparents are an absolute delight. He is now in very loving hands. Not a teacher. A class picture fell out of a girl's desk who was in our class. This was when I was in grade 8, so 2003. It said on the back of the picture, people I want to kill. All the popular people were circled on it, and for some reason I was too. I was shocked she thought I was popular. Felt pretty cool for the first time to be included with those kids. All in all a good day. Oh, we turned it into the teacher. They didn't do anything about it. Not a teacher. But when I was in 5th grade, our teacher tripped over a kid's backpack. She was like, "Why do you have in there? Bricks?" And he really did have bricks in there. My crazy mom thought it would be cool to give me a coconut and a knife for lunch one day. I got in trouble for having a knife. 2nd grade. I was just hungry. She thought it would be a cool thing to bring to school. You don't wanna know how often I explained to middle schoolers that having nudes of each other on their phones and passing them around constituted child sexography and that they could be charged. I remember when I was in middle school, a fellow 8th grader's dad was a tattoo artist. Somehow this kid had managed to bring his dad's tattoo equipment to school and it was confiscated when he tried to tattoo another kid whilst his friends held this kid down. Pretty sure it was going to be a forced tattoo, but a teacher was walking by and heard the screams and stopped it. Random search turned up a nice pic. Good times. Had to take about a dozen condoms from a 3rd grader once. He was getting them from the older kids after school and playing with them. He had no idea how to use them, but he sure liked blowing them up like balloons. I accidentally brought my camping bag to school with me once. It was the day after a 1-week camping trip and my camping pack looked very similar to my school pack. I had 2 Leathermans, a pocket knife, multiple fire starters, small game traps, box of ammo. I realized after I got to study hall first thing in the morning, that bag was not opened or even left my back till I got home. Students attached human hair to a piece of paper with band-aids. It was very creepy. Former 4K teacher here. On the first day of school I had to take away a shotgun shell from a 4-year-old. The second day it was a lighter from the same kid. Not me personally, but at my school, we had a 6th grader get busted smoking pot in the bathrooms, so he was suspended. On the day he came back, he had to report to the office, and they told him they were going to check his bag. He immediately, "Anything you find doesn't belong to me." They found something like a pound of weed in his backpack. Turns out dad was one of the local drug dealers and was trying to get his son to find him some new customers among the other 6th graders. Last I heard, the dad had been arrested and the kid was being placed into foster care. Hopefully he ended up with someone who would raise him better. Obligatory not a teacher. I'm not a teacher. I'm a student. When I was 10 I had a tack hammer taken away by a teacher, but when I told on the girl who had a bag full of knives they never even checked. I'm so proud of the disturbing things I confiscated from my students. Worked at a school year where the kids historically had bad refs, but dang were they adorable. Practice blunts of paper and tacky crumbs. Practice lines of tacky dust. Dice made of paper being used to play craps with our positive behavior $. Guess what city we're in? My absolute favorite. Student and I were working together at our intervention table. We are both autistic, have PTSD, ADHD. We get in trouble a lot. Somehow a teacher-student duo constantly towing the line with admins. Student was having some issues with inappropriate sexual behavior at the time. So when their book bag started vibrating, I was freaking mortified and terrified. Our eyes met. They knew I knew. Silence. Then they pulled out a vibrating toothbrush. Best prank ever. We once had a middle school kids bring a turtle to school. A teacher heard kids talking about it in the hallway. She alerted me, and sure enough, in his locker we found a Reddit slider in a gym bag. I kept the turtle in my office and he took it home at the end of the day. Back in high school this girl brought a needle to school and was walking around the halls poking people with it. It was confiscated. Obviously, they were able to determine that it had not been used by her to inject herself or anyone else with anything. They did have to go around and find everyone that had been poked though to make sure no one had any diseases. In high school some guy wrote out a whole plan on how he was going to kill me and taped it to my locker. He actually did try to enact his plan, but I was practically a foot taller than him and overpowered him. Then I reported him to the principal, who called the police. The guy was expelled promptly. My student, but not something that I confiscated. At the end of the year last year, during finals week when class was over, and it was just tests and grade finalization, I was chatting with one of the art teachers. We started talking about a mutual student that he had, who I'll call Ryan. He was a very quiet, bright kid, kind of weird in my classroom, was always walking around the room and barely ever sat in his seat, preferring to stand at the lab tables in the back. Sometimes I got on his case about it. Sometimes I let him do his work back there. Ryan's art teacher asked if I had ever seen anything weird on his work, and I said I hadn't. She then explained to me that other teachers had noticed sketches on classwork of swastikas and other disturbing images. Ryan apparently didn't want to hand in his art journal, but the art teacher finally managed to get a hold of it and looked through it. On top of the Nazi imagery, he had drawn pictures of other kids getting killed, guns, bombs, and so on. His parents were called in. There were meetings, and so on. And I had no idea. Apparently no one thought it was a good idea to tell Ryan's science teacher that all of this was going down, and that I should be on the lookout for this kind of behavior. School administration and the other teachers left me completely in the dark about the situation to the point where I didn't know until he wasn't my student anymore. I would never have guessed that Ryan would be thinking about this kind of stuff. What's interesting is that he always seemed to like me and would sometimes hang out after class to talk for a few minutes. But I'm openly gay and the students know I'm Jewish. So I don't know what his feelings really were. That was last year. So I don't know what's been doing on this year. I'm in the district's other high school as a sub, so I haven't seen him. Hopefully he gets help. A razor blade. Apparently cutting is a thing middle school girls do a lot. Colleague confiscated a Porsche from an underage unlicensed kid. Called parents who told the kid in language of origin to ignore colleague and just drive it home anyway, illegally. Parent gave no fricks. Eventually they had to come down and collect the car because there was no way colleague was handing the keys back to the kid. There's a reason I call them elves. This story pretty much captures it beautifully, entitled Little Frickers. My best friend in junior high decorated the inside of his locker with a ton of pentagrams and when a teacher saw it she freaked out and pulled him into the office, got the principal, and called his parents. My best friend was also kind of a chicken. We loved watching scary movies and reading horror novels and that kind of thing. But it was not without some consequences, like being awake for days and terrified of our own shadows for a while, as everyone was grilling him. His mom says he just clammed up and refused to say a word. Eventually that made the grown-ups more angry, and they demanded that he explain himself. Was he trying to summon demons or worshipping the devil? They eventually broke him, and he spilled it. He wanted to give the impression that he was edgy and cool and into dark magic, but he was too afraid that it would work on accident. So instead of using pentagrams, he used a bunch of the Star of David. Sure enough, the principal marched them all to his locker, the teacher calling him a liar the whole way. When they arrive and open the locker wide, they find not a shrine to the Dark Prince, but of the iconic Jewish symbology. Everyone was too hysterical to really keep a stern tone, and he was let off the hook. I think they still made him take it down though. A dead bird he'd found outside and decided to keep in his pocket. It was only disturbing because I then also had to touch a dead bird from outside. TL. Doctor, nail clippers with intent to stab. I teach 4th grade. My 3rd year teaching, I had this girl in my class from Saudi Arabia. The first few months in my class, she was very quiet and reserved, but as the year went on, she opened up and quickly became one of my favorite students. She was funny and sarcastic, and she started playing with us at recess. I always play football with my students, and she was great at juking kids out. She was great at making a quick cut and getting away from everybody and just burning them with her speed. So, one day we are out playing, and there is a 3rd grade class out at recess. This one kid asks if he can play, and I tell him sure. My Saudi Arabian girl jukes him out once and scores, and it gets this 3rd grader mad off. I tell him to cool it and that we are just playing for fun. Her team gets the ball again eventually, and I throw it to her. She jukes the kid and scores again. He runs up to her, and then she runs over to me, and she looks horrified. She tells me that the little boy just pulled a knife on her and told her that if she juked him out again, that he was going to stab her in the throat. I'm a male, but if anyone messes with my students, I go full on mama bear mode. So, I immediately yell hey, and start marching over to this 3rd grader. He takes off running over to the table where his jacket is and picks it up. His teacher is staring at me confused, and I start interrogating him. He tells me that he didn't tell her that she's lying, and that he doesn't have anything. He empties his pockets for us and says he doesn't have anything. I notice he's holding his jacket pretty tight, so we tell him to give it us. He starts bawling and hands his jacket to us. He had torn a hole in the interior lining and had hidden a pair of nail clippers. We showed them to my student, and she said that he had pulled out the filer that had a hook on the end, and that is what he had threatened her with. Our SRO was called, and he got taken into custody and was expelled from school. Blew my mind that this 3rd grader was going to try to shank my student because she was faster than him. I miss that girl. She went back to Saudi Arabia at the end of the year. I think about her now and then and hope she's doing okay. A hard drive. A student was recovering data on hardcore hard drive. Japanese 30th. It was hard to look at. I didn't get hard. Not sure this counts. My old therapist was the psychotherapy director of an adolescent inpatient mental facility. New patient suitcases were searched for drugs, sharp objects, other life-threatening items, and then the patient was placed in the high security section for observation for 3 days. Upon examining the contents of his suitcase, they found a human arm. The police never did figure out where he got it from. I teach ESL in Korea for elementary and middle schoolers at an Anin cram school. First class of the day, I have Gunho. This 2nd grader that just struggles with everything from learning to proper school behavior. None of the other kids like him. We go at it a little bit sometimes. Usually because he tries to feed answers to other kids, but he's batting a literal .000 average. If anyone in that class is getting a timeout, it's him. During the Parkland school shooting aftermath, Gunho comes in suspiciously with something behind his back, and I ask him what he has. Little dude whips out a switchblade and stabs me in the leg before I can react. Not a real knife. Spring-bladed, retractable, dull. He's laughing his ass off that he got me good while the rest of the class is playing mobile games on their cracked iPhone X's. But goddamn, I came to Korea to escape that kind of stress. My boss had a talk with his mom. My teacher said that once a kid got suspended for putting a dead bird in the backpack of a girl. It was Monday. He had put it in Friday. The kid got suspended though. Not a teacher, but there was a huge bust at my high school where students were passing around a USB that had pics of naked girls from my high school. The USB got intercepted and it was later revealed what it was. This happened to my friend's father, who was once a school teacher at a village somewhere near Patna, India. So he decided to check the school bags of some students. While checking the bag of a 6th grade student who was infamous for being notorious, 6 Indian country-made pistols were found. He just looked the kid in the eye, closed his bag, and never ever checked actual bags again. Needless to say, he left that place as AON as he could. My mom is a teacher at a lower income / high diversity elementary school. In a 3rd grader's locker she found a chisel tip Sharpie. It was hollowed out and a scissor blade was inserted into the marker case. Duct tape was used to pad and hold the blade into place. The kid said he was going to use it on another student. An 8th grade girl stood up in the middle of my English class and started yelling that she was going to kill herself. Got her to the counselor and administrators, and they found she had a small case of razor blades that she said she carried with her at all times for self-cutting and to eventually finish the job for good. Not a teacher, and not directly affected, but this did happen at my school, and one of my friends at the time was in the class it happened in. The vice principal and the school cop walk into the class. One kid starts noticeably getting agitated. The cop unclips his holster and puts his hand on his gun, ready to pull it. My friend says his stomach dropped out of his ass when he heard the unclipping of the holster. The VP walks up to the agitated kids, who goes from being agitated to scared with each approaching step. Once the VP gets up to the kid, he crouches down and grabs the kid's backpack and walks to the front of the room with it. The cop is still ready at any moment to pull his gun while standing in the doorway. Once at the front of the classroom, the VP sets the backpack down on the overhead projector table and opens it. He pulls out a sawed-off shotgun. It was loaded. The VP unloads it, puts everything back in the backpack, and goes to stand on the doorway with the cop. The cop then moves to arrest the kid. I assume they were making sure an adult was in the doorway to prevent the kid from bolting. Anyway, my friend almost shat his pants several times in that 5-minute period. I'm not a teacher, but my friend's dad's cousin's wife's son's girlfriend's stepsister is a teacher, and a drawing of me laying on my back on the floor with knives sticking out of my chest/stomach. Him standing over me with a couple classmates with smiles on their faces. Very clearly my classroom. That, paired with the Kill Mrs. Club oath he'd written about killing me and having no mercy. Fun times. Not a teacher. As a student, however, walking into my school the day of Halloween, we had bag checks. Happened every year. I had a pocket pussy I kept in my book bag because I couldn't think of a better place to hide it. So on the day of Halloween, I walked into school not realizing that I forgot to hide it somewhere, and then came the bag checks. My heart was pounding faster and harder each time I got closer to bag check. Now the guards weren't the ones who checked the bags. It was a parent coordinator who I knew very well. She opened my bag and examines it. At this point it's pretty well hidden, until she notices a large bump in my bag. She asks me to open the zipper. There it was. My $25 pocket pussy I had tried so hard to keep hidden, out in the public. I told her not to open it, and that I was holding it for a friend. She immediately confiscated it, and took it to the principal. She found out, and in transitioning to second period, she calls me to her office and says, "Here, take it. I'm not going to call your parents, but it's really not a good idea you keep crap like that in your bag." I let out a huge sigh of relief. I told my best friend and he proceeded to roast me right in front of the principal. Almost every teacher found out, so I was extremely embarrassed about it. Threw that crap in a river the minute I got out of school and went to walk around West Village for Halloween. Student. But my ex-best friend went through a period of trying to convince everyone was crazy. She was a jealous attention seeker, which had ended our friendship in the first place. She shaved her head and was suspended after she was caught trying to smuggle multiple scalpels used for lino cutting out of the art room. A piece of writing paper with a smiley face on it made by using his fingerprints. The ink was blood from a bloody nose. He was a 3rd grader. Condom filled with diarrhea. I'm not a teacher, but once I stole some drugs from some dumb kids. Till schools doing random bag and locker checks was a real thing. I always thought that was just a thing in movies. Not a teacher. A girl wrote a erotic story about her and one of her science teachers under an anonymous alias on some writing site. She started telling kids about it, and it included stuff like in penetrating her ass with 50 glass stir rods and some very disturbing stuff. She was always kind of weird like that, but it was pretty scarring. It's still posted there to this day. I took a 14-year-old student's phone once because he had it out in class, violating our policy. I was planning on giving it back at the end of the day, but needed to not have it go off. So I looked to see if it was on. All that I saw was a reminder in all caps with a bevy of salacious images. Don't forget to lick girl's name, toes next time we frick. I could barely look at him when I handed it back and asked him to turn it off. I have yet to forget. I probably never will. A small, oversixed, potty-mouthed, hyperactive little turd. The least respite would be if he had punctuated the reminder properly, but no luck. A week later, we were at him letters of gratitude. I saw his started with dear girl's name. I congratulated him on deciding to write a letter to his girlfriend. He said, "No, that's to my sister. Greater than my hope that he learns to use apostrophes properly. My hope is that he is just a pervy little liar. Otherwise, incest." Super late to the party here, but I have to share. My first year teaching was in a K-5 self-contained sped classroom. Mostly non-verbal students with a range of abilities. One morning I went out to the bus to pick up a kindergarten student and the driver said, "I think he's got something in his mouth." I said, "Oh, he has some oral sensory toys he uses. I'm sure it's one of those." Nope. It was a worm. It was alive. He loved the wiggling in his mouth. Not a teacher, but during a locker inspection in 6th grade a kid was found with a 5-pound block of rock salt in his bag. Girl's underwear in the pocket of a deaf male nonverbal student with significant autism and traumatic brain injury. I had no idea how they got there or how to ask him. Not me, but my coworker who is the ceramics teacher. He saw a bunch of girls hiding something in his cabinets in the front of the room. He waited for them to leave and investigated. He found a huge, like 8 inches and stupid thick, sculpted ceramic bean. He described it as incredibly veiny and hard. He then threw it in a clay recycling bucket and all the boys screamed. He now calls them the Peen Girls and won't stop talking about how hard it was. Taught a less than intelligent child long ago. He once got called to the office for whatever reason by the VP standing at the door. He stands up, reaches deep into his pants and throws a bag of weed on someone's desk. Not a friend or anything. Someone he didn't know, and he wasn't even sly with it. It was weird. A note that said, "Dear Lord, please don't let my mommy die of cancer." I was the student. It was my hired handcuffs. Senior year, someone else took them out of my bag. The one and only meeting I ever had with the principal. I explained that my boyfriend and I were experimenting, and that we liked it a little rough. She shrugged, told me that was pretty reasonable, and told me to hide them better at home. Not at school. I had only brought them, so my mom wouldn't find them.